Last week, right here, almost exactly a week ago when I'm filming this, we talked about the Omicron variant and how we're waiting to learn more, just trying to see what happens. In the time between now and then, we've learned some. We haven't learned enough. The waiting game continues in some ways. But I will say this. The encouraging signs, such as they are, thus far, are reasonably positive. I'm not taking that to the bank yet, not betting the farm, but it looks pretty good. When the Delta variant hit India, it was pretty obvious pretty quickly that something terrible had happened because of the mass death. And I don't mean to sound flippant when I say that, but the massive surge in death in India was an immediate signal that something new was happening here. Omicron has obviously been loose for at least a few weeks, and we haven't seen that yet. I suppose it's possible we still will. The fact we haven't yet, as an early indicator, I find encouraging. What I don't find encouraging is that this is a test of the Canadian government, and we're not knocking it out of the park. There's been some talk, and I want to push back on one point before I make my broader point here. If Omicron ends up being not a particularly big deal, if it ends up being either it doesn't transmit well, or it never displaces Delta, or it only causes very mild symptoms, fingers crossed, touch wood, then people will go, oh, this was all hysteria over nothing. This was, this is a waste of time. This was a false alarm. We got everybody worried. I actually don't agree with that. I don't think this is a false alarm. I think this is a fire drill. This is an opportunity to test how we respond to something like this new. In February and March of 2020, when the original COVID came out of China, Canada, and certainly other countries, but let's focus on the one we actually live in. Canada was caught completely flat-footed. We had no effective response, and we stumbled around at a federal level for months. The one thing the Canadian government did well, and I guess they have some experience with this, it was cash transfers. They transferred cash to Canadians efficiently and designed those programs quickly. Okay, that's not nothing. In terms of actually sealing the borders, though, we never really did a good job at that. 20 months later, we're having an opportunity, false alarm, or as I prefer to call it, a fire drill, if nothing else, to see are we doing any better this time. And the early indications are that no, we're not. A couple of weeks ago, when we learned about Omicron, the federal government responded very quickly. They imposed some travel bans right away. They raised testing requirements at the Canadian airports. And I was like, okay, well, they've learned. Like, for the previous experiences have taught them some lessons here. And I was mildly encouraged by that. But what we've been seeing since, and the reporting that's come out since these new initiatives have been announced, is that in typical Ottawa fashion, and if I may, in the typical fashion of this particular government, the announcements are for their own sake. We announce stuff. We don't necessarily do stuff, or at least we don't do it effectively. So the health minister had said, the health and the transport ministers had said, travel bans, screening for everyone arriving except Americans, isolation for those who were waiting to find out their screening results. What we're hearing is that the airports didn't know what the rules were. Even after the federal government had said the rules were in effect, the CBC sent reporters to airports. They found chaos. No one knew what the rules were, what they were supposed to be doing. We have reports at the start of this week about Canadians who have passed their tests and are supposed to call the government to log their clearance. There's no one answering the phone number they've been given. Like the most basic call answering service that we ought to have the capacity to do in this country, we can't. There was a report coming out over the weekend about a woman with medical conditions that put her on a restricted diet, is in an isolation facility, and there's no food for her that she can eat, and she's been waiting almost 2 days for a meal. We've had 20 months to improve our state capacity. We have known Omicron or something like Omicron was going to come. Now, next year, 10 years from now, this is a fire drill. And we're all still in the building.